you hear me? Hi and welcome. So happy to be here. My name is Ilana Shamoon. I'm Deputy Director and Director of Programs at the Biennial. And just so excited to be welcoming you all to the launch of Water Kinship Belief, our first exhibition publication. So welcome to everyone here and everyone joining us from home. I'd love to start with a land acknowledgement on behalf of the Biennial team, as we're all accountable to upholding our responsibility to the lands that we are privileged to work upon. Stretching from the Small Arms Inspection Building in Mississauga in the west to the Portlands in the east, our events and activities would not be possible without the care that the stewards of these lands have given for thousands of years. We acknowledge first and foremost that all of TBA spaces are located on land that has been the site of human activity for more than 12,000 years. This land is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe peoples, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Their stories, beliefs, and concepts about the land and the water continue to guide and inspire us. These lands are now home to many Indigenous peoples from across the globe. We understand the role of settler colonial privilege and that this land acknowledgement cannot undo the immensely violent histories against Indigenous peoples on these lands. As a team and in close collaboration with our amazing network of artists, partners, colleagues, and our board, we continue working to dismantle the legacy of colonial systems that impact all aspects of our practices to the best of our abilities. Through our participation in this work and in holding ourselves accountable, we carry forward a commitment to listen, to unlearn, and to grow together. We also honor the individual histories and knowledge that every participant, colleague, guest, and that you all bring with you to the Biennial. We're so thankful to be surrounded by all the teachings and wisdom that you contribute today. And I'd also like to acknowledge, of course, the contributors to this publication, the editors, the writers, the artists, designers, and printers, as well as the many, many people who have worked to make this beautiful publication possible. We're so excited to share it with you. Saying that a project like this is a group effort is truly an understatement, and it took many people to make it happen. I also want to acknowledge our amazing partners at ArtMet, Jonathan, Blair, and Dallas, and the whole team who are here today. So this publication has really been an aspiration of ours since we started preparing our first biennial in 2019. And at TBA, we really think about publications as an integral part of our programming. And we started early on by supporting artist projects, artist books. We then moved into publishing with our inaugural Tools for Learning, which were and are, it continues to be a program that we're publishing. So these are participatory activities for educators and just curious biennial visitors that we began in 2019 and continues this year. We also have a podcast series that will also be continuing this year and started in 2019. We had our first online programs publication, which is titled This Is Not an Archive, launched in the fall of 2021 and is available through our website and was edited by former programs curators Claire Butcher and Myung-Sun Kim. And these many resources for intergenerational readers, listeners, and learners are all part of our growing library and connect with the curatorial processes, the artistic practices, and the organizational research that make TBA such an engaging part of the biennial ecosystem. And now with Water Kinship Belief, this incredible publication that spans our first two editions, we're able to share the long-term, thoughtful research, conversations, and connections that link curators, artists, and so many inspiring collaborators. Through this book, we look back at how the biennial came to be, the organizational and curatorial foundations that we've been building upon these past years, and the artists whose work formed our inaugural 2019 edition. This book also helps us to understand the ideas guiding this current edition, as well as the process that the curatorial team adopted in pandemic times by grounding their collective thinking in a shared vocabulary, the Lexicon, which you'll hear from very shortly. And of course, this book was prepared in advance of this exhibition, so it speculates what TBA 22 would look like and how artists would respond to ideas of relationality and kinship in the particular context of this place, as put forward by the Biennial's curators. As you join our reading today, you'll be hearing directly from Katie Lawson and Tyrone Bastin, who along with Candace Hopkins curated the 2019 and 2022 biennials and also edited this book. And there are in fact so many voices captured in this publication, the editors and contributors, all of the artists who have participated in our exhibitions across two editions, but also everyone who made this publication so special. As I said, there are many, many people, but I do want to shout out Mark Sue, our dedicated managing editor, and his team at Linguistic Services, the deeply thoughtful designers, Santiago de Silva and Sean Yendris, and Melody Moon Kyung Cho from the TBA team, who really did too much legwork to even list today. And of course, again, very grateful to Jonathan and the ArtMet team. So now I'd like to welcome Katie and Tyrone, our brilliant curators, who will tell you a little bit more about the book's conception, share the contributors, and read from the lexicon.
Hi, everyone. We have some folks just arriving, so I'm gonna wait a minute, let you get settled. Hi. Good to see you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Alana, and to all of you for being here. It feels incredibly surreal to have this book on my lap. Today is the first time that that is happening. And as Alana mentioned, this book has been a shared nebulous dream for nearly 4 years now. And I am going to share a little bit about the conception of the book, give a bit of context to it as a publication and as an object as well, before passing it over to Tyrone to introduce the curatorial lexicon. We'll have a short reading, and then we'd also really like to open it up to questions or discussion. And so hopefully we're laying a bit of a foundation for that right now. It was clear very early on when Candace, Tyrone, and I came together within the framework of the biennial that we had a shared love for publications and for exploring the possibilities of printed matter in relation to exhibition making, not as a static record, but as a dynamic entity in its own right, a thoughtful means of disseminating the incredible research, conversations, writing, and thinking that so often lies below the surface of what is visible and legible in this exhibition space, and the other modes that we have available to us. As I mentioned, today Tyrone and I will be reading some excerpts from one of many text contributions that are found in the book. But before doing so, I'd like to highlight a few things. This book came to be in the interstitial time between the 2019 and 2022 biennials. As a curatorial team that had a sustained collaborative engagement across 2 editions of the contemporary art event, we had the unique opportunity to look back and reflect on the inaugural edition while looking forward speculatively to 2022 amidst great uncertainties. In relation to the biennial, we view this publication as a third site, a place where the continuities, the resonances, and dissonances between editions are made evident. Water, kinship, belief is a means to bring together artists, artworks, collaborators, and ideas which have informed the 2 exhibitions, irrespective of chronology and as a part of a greater whole. Through its content and design, this publication is both, we hope, a generative guide to the exhibitions and a biennial site of its own that creates new artistic relations through text and image that course through the book like tributaries, explicitly dispensing with years and categories. This was particularly exciting to us, given that there is such a strong through line of relationality in the curatorial vision. It is also, as Alana mentioned, the first major exhibition publication of a young nonprofit organization. And as such, we wanted to share more broadly some of the work that our collaborators and founders have led more internally. Our engagement with the complex relational context of Toronto as a place has been informed by certain foundational documents that have been commissioned by the Biennial as a means of understanding underrepresented histories that have shaped the region and its communities. Within this book, you will find excerpts from both Angeloff's Indigenous Context and Concepts for Toronto and Camille Turner and Yanya Lee's Black History Navigational Toolkit. Ange's document was shared with artists in advance of each biennial, informing some artist projects from their very conception, while Camille and Yanya's project is a way to navigate the city through its Black histories. It now exists as an incredibly beautiful deck of cards as well within the Biennial's mobile arts curriculum. Both are grounding to us. Both are a means of attuning ourselves to the sublimated histories and stories held in land and water. And Camille and Yanya are three of many in a very expansive polyphony of voices whose inspiring work is contained within the pages of this book. And I'm not going to take you through the table of contents, but just to say that it's our hope you'll be able to move through these different contributions and attune yourselves to the voices you find here outside of the confines of a linear narrative. We have beautiful essays from our first two inaugural curatorial fellows, Chiedza Pasipanodia, who is here with us today, Sebastian Deline, who's with us in spirit, Adrienne Blackwell, who has an incredible essay that was formative to the development of the performance program that was a part of 2019, and also an essay from Charles Stankovich for his guest curated program at the Cinesphere. New relations will inherently be produced in the hands of each reader and in the connections made and the knowledge you carry with you. These generous contributions offer reflections on over 4 years of creative exchange that extend far beyond the bounds of our curatorial team to include an expanded network of collaborators. Now, to talk about the thing. The form of this publication was collaboratively developed with designers Santiago de Silva and Sean Yendries, whose generative contributions have manifested in bespoke material details. Santiago, Sean, and Mark Sue's openness to experimentation allowed us time and space to begin conceiving of the design, the structure, and the material qualities of the book before much of the content had been written or images collected or even artworks produced. A highly unusual stacking of more conventionally staggered or sequential acts. I might be mixing my metaphors, but they were really willing to get into the water with us and work together to build an ambitiously scaled boat while treading water. Much of the book is printed in monochrome, but with a technique that uses 3 blue inks. The exact coloration of each copy is one of a kind as a result, with the various shades of blue echoing the variability in the color of water. Water became a means to guide the design, its subtle shifts affecting the hues of the words and images on the page. And every book includes a special edition handmade rope woven from agave fibers by 2 families of artisans that Santiago is connected with in Oaxaca, Mexico. The rope is a river, a line to mark the reader's path through the book, to mark a page for deeper contemplation, or to weave between pages in producing new relations of your own. As a literary tributary, it is made by hand from natural materials, and yet another way to signal the connections to land, to water, and to traditional knowledges and practices of making. Yeah.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Katie, and lead up to what I just want to talk quickly about, which is an introduction to the lexicon, which is in fact an important part of the book and something that we will be reading from today. But I wanted to give, or we wanted to give everybody a bit of background on how it came about and the role it played within both the conception of this book, but also really over the course of the last 4 years, guiding us through the process of putting these 2 exhibitions together. So the 2 editions of the Biennial emerged out of encounters with so many people. As Katie has mentioned, the notion of polyphony was really important to us, to give space for others to speak and to tell us stories and to share their stories, their mythologies, their narratives of this place and the places where they're from. So the curation itself was a collective act, and that was importantly rooted in the theme of relationality. And so, of course, there was Candace, Katie, and myself, but there was also, at a very important stage of this biennial, Claire Butcher and Young Sun Kim, whose thoughts and ideas are part of the DNA of this book. The thematics for the Shoreline Dilemma and the what water knows, the land remembers were guided by our experiences and our conversations with each other and with the artists and collaborators that we worked with. And through the teachings, we have tried to capture as many as possible within this book. You'll hear, as Katie mentioned, many of those voices are present in this book, either through essays or through quotation. The list is long, so I'm glad that Katie thanked those who we've already thanked, but there are many, many more. Each one shared specific knowledges, and as Candace writes, the idea of this knowledge is not, the idea of the lexicon, I should say, is not that we are trying to define the terms within it, but in fact, we are trying to open up spaces for interpretation. And Candace writes beautifully in the book, the desire for fixed meaning is a colonial anxiety. And I think that was something that we really, really held true and really wanted to not escape, but to just find those fugitive spaces in which coloniality wouldn't define the terms by which we worked. And yet in coming together, it was important for us to have anchors or centers of gravity. So like the publication of Angeloff's context, as well as Yanya Lee and Camille Turner's text, we wanted to have a language for ourselves that anchored us and that guided our work together. And to arrive at that language, we enlisted the help of many people, but I think one person particularly who played an important role was C.A. Conrad, who some of you may recall from the program in 2019. C.A. was part of Isonomia, where they gave a reading of their poetry at the Small Arms Inspection Building. And one of the benefits of working over the course of 2 editions of the biennial is that we are able to engage with those who participated in much deeper ways over a longer period of time. And so we were very fortunate to have started that conversation with CA in 2019. And in between the 2 biennials, which of course was a time of the pandemic, we were all isolated at home. We were feeling deep anxiety, emotional, physical, and spiritual. It was a really important moment for us to connect with CA, who tuned in from Seattle, was it?
From a number of places. CA is often on the road, and
Right.
that is a part of their MO.
Yeah, exactly. So CA tuned in and was so gracious with their time because they were, extremely busy and doing many, many things. But we, all of us, were able to collectively gather and work through what CA has devised, which are these somatic poetic rituals. And CA led us through a series of them over the course of a week. Some of them, I mean, Katie will probably have her favorites, but mine was the talking into fruit. And my husband is back there, he'll remember me doing this, thinking I was crazy, but literally sort of reciting certain words that we thought were meaningful to us into a piece of fruit in the morning, and then putting the fruit under a bowl and leaving it there for the day. And then at one point, eating the fruit. And as you're eating the fruit, you're thinking of how that fruit has become an archive and a container of those words, and is actually teaching you something that you might not have realized or thought of before. And so it was a deeply healing and teaching moment for all of us, I think. I don't know, do you have a favorite ritual?
There was a good one with some blind contour drawing, which you would then repeat with water on the fingertip on your face in the mirror. That was a beautiful one. But it was really, one of them was as simple as calling to mind 3 words from the lexicon and really holding them in your mental space, and washing a clean dish. And CA speaks about these rituals as a kind of form of extreme presencing, of really bringing ourselves back to an embodied experience and almost getting out of our own way when it comes to sitting down and writing, and to get away from, as Tyrone mentioned, this this anxiety or this urge to define the thing in a very singular and concrete manner. And so I think it was a really beautiful opportunity for us to connect with ourselves and each other and to try approaching our own writing a bit differently too.
Yeah, and it also, I should say, came about just as we were starting the first drafts of our essays for the book. And so it actually also really much helped with that process. And so we really thank CA for their guidance and their spiritual leadership, I think, in kind of helping us pull this book together. But without further ado, I think maybe we can read from a few of the terms. Yeah, and then maybe open it up to questions for the rest. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. They're brief, so bear with us. Attunement. Attunement is like harmonics. Harmonics are everywhere. Every material, even air, has its own vibration. For sound to exist, particles need to vibrate alongside each other. There needs to be a sense of friction. In our universe, everything is vibrating, especially at the particulate level. Is this what attunement is? An awareness at the level of particulate matter? Yet attunement takes place on the macro level as well, in the way the waves form based on the push and pull of the moon, how fish inherently know where to travel to spawn, even if it's hundreds of miles of river, the exact moment that a flock of birds chooses to migrate south, an acute reading of air pressure and temperature changes. Is attunement predicted on other forces that act like a set of tuning forks, devices to aid in achieving the same pitch? Is it a mediated process? And if so, what parts of our bodies are the mediators? What parts are like tuning forks? How do we pay attention to those? The tuning forks of my arms, sending and receiving waves, vibrations between us. Am I attuned to or in tune with? I'm reminded of the frequency illusion or bias, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, which is the cognitive bias wherein, after noticing something for the first time, there's a tendency to notice it more often. I'm led to believe that it has a high frequency. This pattern of exposure and recognition swirls around and around. Without this experience, what goes unknown, unseen, unfelt, unheard?
Archive. An archive is defined as a collection of historical documents. Etymologically, its roots are in the Greek word archaeon, a public place where records are kept. But archives of this kind are incomplete and biased towards power. Where then are the gaps? What may be missing, buried, criminalized, or otherwise denigrated in the archive? And what illicit danger do such fugitive agents and stories pose? What if we treated the gaps in the archive as openings for escape? Archives can exist in other forms, in other living things, as incomplete, indeterminate, and ever-changing. Trees, rocks, ice, rivers, lakes, and so much more are archives of a particular kind. The earth remembers, water remembers. All living things are records of the worlds they help create and encounter. They listen, feel, taste, and absorb. That is, they are evidence of time and the movement of other things around and through them as vibrations, marks, bruises, shifts in color, texture, and weight.
Collective. Think of the collective like the murmuration of birds, where many bodies become one and move in rhythm with one another, sharing the same flight path. This syncopation, this creation of a shared space of many bodies, is the formation of collective identity, however temporary. Consider the other words for collectives: packs, herds, flocks, bunches, and their more ominous counterparts: hordes, droves, gangs, armies. Is collectivity a shared ethos? Does it have a leader? What impetus is there to generate a group? What forms of thinking and practice does this enable?
Inheritance. Saidiya Hartman once wrote that inheritances are chosen. What then are the inheritances that we are choosing, ones of our own definition? What about inheritances that are carried with the body? These are markers of ancestry: the set of a cheek, or the shape of an eye. These inheritances offer a way to read history through our bodies, like lineages of form. What is the relationship between inheritance and ritual? In choosing an inheritance, we take it up and bring it forward into the present moment. We revive it through individual agency, and by aligning ourselves with it, such reinscription of inheritance is the present in ritual. And what of inheritances that are not biological or chosen, but rather those painful and unwanted inheritances that persist and infect the present? How do we exercise, tend to, and care for traumas passed down from generation to generation?
Reading. This one starts with a quote actually from the incredible book, The Hundreds by Lauren Berlant and Kathleen Stewart. And I quote, "The image that comes to mind when you read that, if images come to mind when you read, might not be what we're imagining, and we're likely not imagining the same things either. Collaboration is a meeting of minds that don't match. Circulation disturbs and creates what's continuous, anchoring you enough in a scene to pull in other things as you go," end quote. We read printed text, yes, but we also read one another's body language. We read images, tea leaves, landscapes, tonal shifts. We read the room, data, fortunes and misfortunes, footprints, fingerprints, maps, notations, and scores. We read the sky and waters, the rings of a tree, the behaviors of our more than human kind.
Kinship. Kinship is a state of collective being. Kinship is often reduced to notions of shared origins or relations of blood, but it is far more expansive and wayward. Like water, kinship exists everywhere and in everything. And like water, it is able to change shape and exist in many forms. And where water struggles to flow is precisely where it is most persistent, able to shape and penetrate the hardest stone, which is where the strongest kin is often found, like within a chosen family, between colleagues or friends, within the bonds of strangers forged by common struggle, or, if we think more bravely, with the care of gardens, companionship of animals, memories of ancestors and others long gone, and projections and dreams of possible futures. It is with this fugitive and indeterminate meaning of kinship that we find an entangled coexistence that stretches the limits of what we see or know as human or more than human. And by that, I mean worthy of being kin, being alive, or being understood as life. Kinship is where the like and unlike meet in moments of care, conflict, joy, and heartbreak.
Translation. For that which is lost in translation, where does it go? If energy is not created or destroyed, but redistributed and transformed, much like water, that which slips away is not lost, but merely illegible in this moment between you and I.
And finally, opacity. And I'll start here with a quote. A quote from Edouard Glissant's Poetics of Relations. "Only by understanding that it is impossible to reduce anyone, no matter who, to a truth he would not have generated on his own, that is, within the opacity of his time and place. This same opacity is also the force that drives every community, the thing that would bring us together forever and make us permanently distinctive. Widespread consent to specific opacities is the most straightforward equivalent of non-barbarism. We clamor for the right to opacity for everyone." End quote. But I continue. Opacity is a state that is difficult to see through or read. If I choose opacity, I refuse to be visible and thereby known. It is the restraint and protection of an interior world, a partial presence in a community. Opacity requires humility and bravery. Humility to accept that one is unknowing, and bravery to move through an unknowable world. Deception and manipulation are risks. Fear and superstition are not far off. Opacity requires sharpening non-visual senses, sound, smell, taste, and touch. Is this intuition? Opacity also requires wisdom gained from experiences, from multisensory encounters, from movement in and through and with others. Opacity speaks of unknowability in a world of complex, subterranean correspondences between all things. Opacity is a strategy for survival.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we recognize that not everyone has a copy of the book, but if there are any questions, I think we would be happy to answer. There are some contributors, people who are represented here in the book. So if you all want to speak as well, we'd be happy to be in discussion.
Yes. Hi.
I mean, I would speak for myself, but maybe you can also answer. I don't think so. It hasn't been in any way a guide for what we did. Yeah, I think we, yeah.
I feel incredibly grateful for the immense amount of trust that I felt from the organization in supporting us to also not make a conventional catalog per se. This was something that was really exciting to us and very meaningful. And we wanted this to be a book that I also imagine it out in the world. And even if someone didn't see either biennial, it just being an interesting book and being able to engage with the incredibly complex history of this place. And so I would say I understand the question, but I feel really fortunate that I think that didn't come into play too much in this conceptualization. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure. Ooh.
Mm.
Professor
Well.
Bastian, would you like to answer?
I mean, I look forward to teaching it in my class, and I'm teaching at OCAD in the curatorial studies program, and I know that a lot of questions for young curators, especially those who are based here, and also curators everywhere, thinking about place-based curation. How do you create new work that speaks and is responsive to a place? How do you work with artists over the course of an extended period of time? I think there was a lot of experimental ways of working that I think this biennial allowed, which was one of them being the fact that we were able to curate 2 editions. And I think this book really speaks to, I think touches upon some of those complexities about how one has to work when thinking through things over the course of an extended period of time. So yeah, I mean, I think a curation class would be important. And I think anybody who's really interested in the arts community in Toronto, I would think, and the kinds of concerns that are really relevant today.
And there's also, I think actually to return to your question about a nonprofit and funding, there's also in 2 parts a conversation between the founders of the biennial, and I think that is a text which in and of itself acts as a document that kind of opens up that process of what it takes to make a biennial from scratch, which feels like. So there's, I think there's a few different ways into the book, or I could imagine some different possibilities for its use. I would also be excited about it possibly being taken up as a means of exploring book as exhibition, because I think especially when I think back to being a student in art school and not having access to spaces necessarily, or there being a real scarcity around spaces to mount exhibitions and to try things out, I think that books are a really incredible platform to still engage with the same kinds of conversations that feel so urgent to us as curators, as artists, as a kind of extended art community. And that, you know, it opens up a question around independent arts publishing in Canada as well. Yes. I'll repeat a bit of the question. So asking about the genesis really of the lexicon and maybe how it might have changed over time too, from what I understand in your question, which is to say that it was at one point this incredibly long list of words. It was something that was not static, very much that we were adding to and then subtracting from over time, and it being something we would revisit after studio visits with artists or in meeting with other folks to broaden our understanding of the context of Toronto. Anything that we did together when it came to learning from others, I feel like we were able to use the lexicon as a means to reflect on those experiences collectively, and also to see what was continuing to feel urgent, because I don't know about all of you, but my sense of time during the pandemic got very slippery and feeling what was the most urgent of so much urgency.
Mhm.
And it being just like really a tool for grounding ourselves, for coming back, for understanding what still feels like a priority and continues to resurface over time. And I would say it existed just as this leaky list, probably until last summer when we started doing the workshops with CA. And that's when the writing really got underway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would also say that, you know, the lexicon is something that you can really take with you, I think, through the exhibition, because really as the exhibition for 2022 started to form, because of course these words were with us in 2019, but the lexicon itself hadn't really taken shape. It was a lot of learning from 2019 and then projecting towards 2022. But really, as we started to think about how each of these spaces would come together, a number of terms around for each space actually started to emerge. And they were the ways that we were able to kind of connect the threads of the work. So that too also then became something that guided us into thinking, okay, what actually should be in this book. So thankfully, all of that came about sort of the finalization of 2022 exhibition, as well as the book kind of all came around at the same time.
And maybe one thing we haven't touched on about the lexicon as it exists in the book too, is that it's a culmination of writing from Candace, Tyrone, and myself, but there's no delineation or definition of who has written what. So it exists as one collectively authored text without that kind of an indication, which is quite different from, there are also, each of the three of us wrote an essay as a part of the book reflecting on our own curatorial methodology really through the last 4 years. And so it was a nice moment to come together and to also think about our collective voice between the three of us.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the title of the book also becomes kind of key, right? So water, kinship, belief, which were the 3 essays that each of us took on the topic and really wrote through that idea. And you can sort of use either or any of them as a guide through, I think, the exhibition or together. I should also say, and I don't know if it's that clear, but this rope that Katie talked about is a really beautiful addition to the book, because like Katie mentioned, it's kind of a waterway in itself. And so the idea was that it's this quite long bookmark, and it allows you to kind of create different connections between different parts of the book. So you can sort of mark multiple pages and kind of read through, and hopefully that becomes a nice open-ended guide to reading.
If there aren't any questions, I'd also be happy. I don't know what we're like on time, but even to break into a bit more informal, just conversation as a group. Maybe people can, we can get up and folks can get their hands on a copy, flip through, reflect on everything that we've been able to share with you today.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Jonathan, anything from online either, or? That's an amazing question.
Sounds like
I know, it's a test.
oh.
I flipped to a really beautiful spread of Hajra Wahid's work from 2019. So you do also have, this has been quite a like wordy session. And as you can tell, we're all real lovers of thinking about language and about text. But there are also some really incredible instances of just pure documentation too from 2019. So the kind of more experimental aspects of the book really being grounded and also this being an archival document and a record of what happened.
Yeah, and I opened to a double-page spread of a work by Cyrus Marcus Ware from 2019, and I mean, this is one of the treasures of the book, I think, is the people that we were able to sort of continue supporting over the course of 4 years. And someone like Cyrus had really from the get-go was really working through things, really working through a story that he was writing about a kind of potential future, and didn't really know at the start kind of what how this would emerge as artwork. And so it was really exciting to work with him through 2 editions as he first created a kind of live performance and an installation in 2019, and also did a video work with one of our partners at the Ryerson Image Center. But then again, followed up in 2022 with the final chapter of the story, which is currently at Small Arms Inspection Building. And this really beautiful 3-channel film video that he created. So we were just talking before this that it would be really nice to revisit and kind of get back with the artist from 2019, because it is, with this book, I think a really nice moment to reflect on something that now feels a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so
much.
This feels so special. Oh, Jonathan's finger is raised. Oh, a lot. I think there were a lot.
Oh,
I don't know
geez.
if I can remember any.
Was polyphony in the book? Because even though we talk about it, I don't know if it actually made it into the book.
I mean, that was the thing too. It was interesting working in this way while at the same time trying to find the edges or the contour of the thing, how to limit, because I think our way of working and conversing also, it could have been hundreds of words in a way, but we tried to distill it down. And that was really helpful working with CA to do that, to really hone in on what, hey, even if we have 3 words that all sort of point to a similar thing, what is the one that really feels grounding and anchoring? Because like
also,
that might have been a lot of the editing out, was also like circling a concept with quite a few words and trying to land on the one.
Yeah, and you'll notice too that I think in the lexicon, a number of words don't have definitions with them, because I feel like we only really wanted to write that which came kind of naturally to us,
Yeah.
but other words, although they were important, just didn't generate initially, but were still important and really wanted them to be there.
And I think that some were evocative enough in their own right, or we wanted them to be as open-ended as they felt to us the whole way of working on this book. Yeah. Good question. I'm actually, I know I kept the edit out list, so now I really want to go back and look. That's a follow-up. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Then I was like, oh, I wrote here. Fine. I know. Like, oh. I'm gonna give this back. We're